So Craig, is there a system also for training and education that could be implemented?
I think there is. I think we spoke a lot about practice earlier, and we need to keep practice like bite-sized pieces as we build up to slightly bigger exercises. And we also know that one size doesn't fit all. So everybody's got different working practices. And we want to build familiarity. So familiarity with the tool we're using and familiarity with the instructors or the trainers. I think it's really important that you get that personable approach to training. So there's one way of training where we all click through the same online slide packs. Well, actually, how many of us just click through it all the time? Well, I personally probably do, yeah. So we actually want a bit of interaction. So if we want to build competence, we want to build competence around when it fits people. So we don't need to force people to attend 5 hours of training on Wednesday the 14th, for example.
No.
We actually say within the next 2 or 3 months, if you could attend all of these courses, that would be great. Your competence is going to build up, and I can track that.
I will do that with people from other organizations.
I think that's really important. So as soon as we start to isolate our training within our single branches or single functions, we lose that breadth of thought. So for example, if you are a crisis manager or a member of a crisis team from a hospital, and then you're working with someone from a travel agency, for example, you're both going to have different perspectives and different outputs. And I think that builds a really rich learning environment when you have an instructor or a facilitator that can kind of spark debate. And actually we understand the principles are the same, the processes are the same, but the specifics are something that we need to learn through bigger experience, tabletop exercising, and build on that. But build the foundations and a breadth of knowledge first.
And there is also a possibility to keep the pot boiling, so to speak. We talked about it earlier when it comes to, we need to keep this competence developing over time, right? It's not one thing you do once in your lifetime, right?
Absolutely not. So, for example, introductory courses are often changing, and a good provider will continuously update the delivery, the personnel, and particularly if you're getting the information delivered by a different person, it adds a different perspective. So revisiting a course that you've previously done is absolutely doable and shouldn't be laborious or time or resource intensive.
Or perhaps something you should do once a year or something like that.
Absolutely, once a year, twice a year. I think that depends on what it is we're looking at. Certainly the basics is something that we should seek to reinforce. When it comes to more advanced and specialist stuff, I think we should take time for it all to sink in, but we need to build that foundation. But importantly, we need to understand training is done around when it fits with my schedule. So I'm motivated to do it. I'm learning from it. I'm not tired or jaded and unmotivated.
No.
And particularly, I think it needs that people approach, an instructor in front of you to make it happen.
So you just sign up for courses on the platform and then you attend them on a single Teams link or?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So on the Murphy platform, it's exactly what we've done. We've reached for simplicity. All our courses are no more than 2 hours and they're all instructor-led. And you'll be amongst other learners from different industries. And I think that's really, really exciting.
It's good networking as well.
Really good networking as well. Yeah, and it's simple as sign up, I pick and choose the date, and each month there will be the same courses and they're constantly being reviewed. So whether you've done a basic course 6 months ago or today, it's going to be different.
That sounds great.
Thank you.
So is there really a need for technical support when you're in a crisis management situation?
I think there is. In this interconnected world, we're operating globally and we have a lot of interconnected or wider stakeholders. So absolutely, there's a need for some form of technical support as we go forwards in our crisis management.
Yeah, I mean, this is the way we work now as well. We don't sit in the same room anymore, do we?
We don't. So that virtual working environment, or the hybrid working environment, is something that's becoming more familiar to a lot of people now. And it's actually, when we look at the COVID epidemic, for example, there was a need to operate virtually and remotely. So absolutely, when it comes to crisis management, we need a platform that we can use across the globe at the same time.
And what's the requirement of a platform like that? I've heard a lot about different platforms as well. They have been quite complicated to actually maneuver within a crisis. And I see when the crisis really comes, you skip that tool because it's too complicated. So what requirements would you say a system of this?
I absolutely agree with you. There's a lot of products on the market, but they increase complexity when the most important thing is what we need to be doing at that time is reducing complexity and creating simplicity. So we need something easy to operate, usable, user-friendly, easy to operate, and creates a picture in front of us to allow us to start managing ourselves out of crisis, as it were. We want to reduce that complexity. We don't need things to interoperate. We don't need a graph here or something there that confuses us, overstimulates our senses, and actually creates a bit more chaos and ambiguity. So the first thing I'll say is familiarity, simplicity, and usability.
Is that why we want to draw things on a whiteboard, you would say?
Absolutely. We're all familiar with a whiteboard or a blackboard if we're that old and went to school back in the day when there was chalk and pens. But absolutely. A whiteboard in itself creates a simplified picture that we can all see. There's nothing hidden in files somewhere. It's right in front of us. The other good thing about a whiteboard is it's got limited capacity. So if we start putting too much on, we want to start rubbing things out. So it brings us into what is important and helps us focus our mind. If we've got 3 or 4 whiteboards, we actually increase complexity by wanting to fill up that space.
Tell me a little bit more about simplicity, because I think it's so crucial, and we've been talking about that when it comes to plans, when it comes to training, etc. And how does that fit into the system as well? Okay. Simplicity.
So at Murphy, the number one principle that we work with is simplicity. And I think it's one of the hardest things to do, is to simplify something. So when it comes into simplicity in a platform, it means simplicity in learning how to use it. We don't have time or resources to spend hours and hours or weeks or years, as some organizations do, learning how to use one thing. We don't have time to sit and understand what the picture is in front of us. So when it comes to simplicity, it's how do we present information in such a way that creates understanding very quickly to allow us to organize and then start to lead ourselves out of the crisis.
And understanding is really the key here, right?
Understanding is the key. If we present information simply and easy to see visually, that means as a group, we're going to start to understand the bigger picture much quicker than if we work in silos or if we start to hide information in amongst lots of things. So keeping that simple, front of house, here it is, I see everything that's going on, that's going to allow us to really build a situational awareness or our operating picture quickly. And
this kind of supports the procedures as well. There are certain things that you need to do during a crisis, right?
There absolutely are, particularly dependent on the type of crisis. So if you're facing a cyber crisis, there might be a lot of very technical tick box things that you need to do, disconnecting from the internet, for example, in extremis. But you might want to start sandboxing things, right up into communicating early. So within the first 15 minutes, what is my first message? And do we share that message amongst us? That needs to be displayed. What are our lines to take? What am I communicating? Who's responsible for communicating this? But equally, what has happened? What's going on? Because there's going to be a lot of confusion. And if we get that picture in front of us and it's constantly updated, then we're really going to share what's going on, and we're not going to isolate ourselves working in different bits. We can start to bring in all the functions together to manage ourselves out.
Okay, thank you very much for a good explanation of the importance. But in the end, I also want to add, does this replace the whiteboard and pen and paper, you would say?
I'm going to say no. I'm going to say it's a complementary factor too. Why? Imagine if I went out and walking in the forest or the hills. I'm an ex-army officer, so I often get lost when I've got a map and a compass. So I've got my GPS, but what happens if that GPS fails? I need to know how to use a map and compass and get myself out. The same goes for leading in a crisis. It's brilliant that we can have this situational awareness in front of us to lead out of crisis, but what happens if that goes down? We're replicating what we see in front of us to the same practices and same processes. It's familiarity in process by creating that simplicity between a whiteboard and what's in front of us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.